Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5th week of our developmental psychology course. How's everyone doing? How's the midterm prep coming along? Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email anytime. Today, we will learn about cognitive development. We will explore the amazing contributions of two brilliant minds, Piaget and Vygotsky, and their impact on the developmental psychology and the psychology of learning. Gaining an understanding of how children make sense of the world has long been the focus of research into cognitive development. Cognitions involve the high order mental processes we use to understand and adapt to our environment. This includes thinking, reasoning, learning, and problem solving. The child's thinking may differ from that of adult in many ways, and these differences continue to intrigue and baffle researchers and parents alike. In cognitive development psychology, we focus on figuring out the mix of skill and limitation that shape how children think at different stages of their growth, and understanding how kids overcome this limitation and develop new abilities. Jean Piaget was the eldest child of a professor of medieval literature and the daughter of the owner of the first crucible steel factory in France. From the young age, Piaget showed a remarkable interest in the natural science. By the age of 11, he had published his first scientific paper on a part albino sparrow, and by 15, he had several publications on mollusks, earning him a reputation among European zoologists. He earned his PhD in zoology at the age of 22. Through his lifetime, he received 31 honorary doctorates from universities around the world, including Harvard and Cambridge. Piaget's early fascination with biology and philosophy and his keen observation skills laid the foundation of his later groundbreaking work in developmental psychology. In addition to his scientific interests, Piaget had a strong interest in philosophy, thanks to his godfather Samuel Cornut, who introduced him to the subject. This early exposure to philosophical ideas greatly influenced Piaget's thinking and eventually led him to merge his interests in biology and epistemology, the study of knowledge. Piaget's interest in psychology was also influenced by his mother's struggle with mental health. He studied psychology under the guidance of Carl Jung and Eugen Bleuler in Zurich. In 1919, Piaget moved to Paris to study at the Sorbonne. While in Paris, he worked at Alfred Binet's laboratory, where he created and administered reading tests to school children. Piaget was particularly interested in the reasoning processes behind the errors children made on these tests. This work deepened his understanding of children's cognitive development and set the stage for his lifelong research into how children think and learn. Jean Piaget's theory is deeply influenced by both biology and philosophy. From a philosophical perspective, he explored how children understand concepts like space, time, causality, number, quantity, classes, relations, and the ideas on invariance and change. On the biological side, he looked at cognitive structures as ways to organize information, helping us understand and remember things more effectively. When studying cognitive development, we pay attention not on how much they know or how quickly they can do things. Think of it as a journey where each stage builds on the one before it. You can only move to the next stage once you master the current one. Each stage is marked by a set of related cognitive structures. Once this structure develops, they influence how well people perform on different types of thinking tasks. Human intelligence helps us adapt to our environment. This adaptation happens through two processes: assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when we incorporate new information into our existing cognitive schemas. For example, a child might call a dolphin a fish because they are fitting this new animal into their existing idea of swimming animals. Accommodation is when we modify our existing cognitive schemas or create new ones in response to new information that doesn't fit our current understanding. For instance, a child might change their idea of what birds are after meeting a penguin. Another key principle in Piaget's theory is the equilibrium principle. Piaget believed that our minds strive to reach and maintain a state of balance. When a child encounters something new and confusing, it creates a sense of imbalance. To restore balance, the child uses processes of assimilation and accommodation to incorporate and adjust to the new information. Piaget divided development into four general stages or periods: sensor-motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. You might remember this from our first week of lectures. Now we will take a closer look at all of them together. The sensorial-motor period is the first stage in Piaget theory of cognitive development, focusing on cognition during infancy. This stage is about how infants learn through the senses and motor activities. It's a fascinating time when babies start to understand the world by interacting with it directly, by touching, tasting, seeing, and moving around. Substage 1: from the birth to first month of age. In this stage, a newborn's adaptive behavior is limited to simple biologically provided reflexes, like sucking and the palm reflex. These behaviors are seen as automatic responses to specific environmental stimuli and show only slight changing during the first months of life. Critics argue that Piaget underestimated newborn behavior competence. Piaget might have called these reflexes, but today we refer them to as congenially organized behaviors, reflecting their complexity and coordination. As these initially inflexible behaviors start to be modified by experience, the infant moves into the second sensorimotor substage. Substage 2: from first to fourth month of age. During this stage, infants' reflexes start to adapt and become sensoromotor schemas. These schemas are skilled and generalizable patterns of action that infants use to interact with and make sense of the world. For example, an infant's sucking reflex can be applied to various objects, not just nipples, but also rattles, stuffed toys, and fingers. Infants' behavior at this stage is inner directed, meaning they use these schemas for the pure pleasure of using them. Schemas undergo two types of development during this substage. First, individual schemas become progressively refined. For instance, a 1-month-old infant might grasp a hard, thin rattle and a soft, fat stuffed toy in essentially the same way. By 4 months, the infant is much more skilled and has adapted the grasping scheme to a variety of objects. The second change involves the coordination of initially independent schemas. Instead of being performed in isolation, these schemas are now combined into larger units. For example, Schemas involving different sensory modes, visual, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, begin to be integrated. Recent studies indicate that Piaget might have underestimated how early infants start coordinating their senses. The basic of visually directed reaching might be present quite early, as well as the ability to match what they feel with what they see. These early competences are limited and don't negate Piaget's claim that intermodal coordination improves over the early months. However, they do suggest that the beginning of such coordination are present earlier than he believed. At this stage, infants begin to show a clearer interest in the outer world. The schemas are directed away from the baby's own body and toward exploration of the environment. One manifestation of this greater awareness of the environment is that the infant discovers procedures for reproducing interesting events. For example, the infant might accidentally kick a doll, making the doll jump, and then spend the next 10 minutes happily kicking and laughing. The infant is beginning to develop knowledge of what they can do to produce desired outcomes. The substage 3 infant shows a kind of after-the-fact grasp of causality. Once the infant has accidentally hit on some interesting outcomes, they may be able to reproduce it. What the infant cannot yet do is figure out in advance how to produce interesting outcomes. Substage 4, from 8 to 12 months of age. During substage 4, the after-the-fact restriction disappears. Now the infant first perceives a desirable goal and then figures out how to achieve it. In doing so, the infant demonstrates the first generally intentional behavior. A common way to study intentional behavior is by observing how infants respond to obstacles. Imagine a baby reaching for a toy, and we place a pillow in the way. Before stage 4, the baby might just get frustrated or treat the pillow like the toy. But in substage 4, a baby will intentionally push the pillow aside to get to the toy. The infant moves from one shim to another, reaching the goal. Interestingly, research suggests that even younger infants, as early as 6 months, might show intentional behavior. For example, in the still face paradigm, when mothers stop responding to their babies, the infants try to get their attention by increasing their vocalization and smiles. Substage 5, from 12 to 18 months. During this stage, infants begin to deliberately and systematically vary their behaviors, creating new schemas and producing new effects. They start to use tools in different ways, such as pulling and pushing a box to get a toy. The substage 5 infant experiments for the pure pleasure of experimentation. For example, imagine a baby dropping a spoon from their high chair just to see how it bounces. The parent retrieves and returns the spoon, and then the baby drops it again, maybe with a bit more force. The parent returns the spoon one more time, and this time the baby flings it across the room. Through such active experimentation, infants learn about the world. By 18 to 24 months, infants reach an exciting milestone. They become capable of mental representation. This means they can think about and act on the world internally, not just through their actions. The first 5 sensory-motor substages are marked by remarkable cognitive processes. But there is still one more big step to take. During these 5 substages, infants adapt to the world through our behavior. Even in substage 5, problem solving is about trying one behavior after another until they find a solution. In substage 6, however, infants start to think things through. They can now mentally represent the world, which means they can plan and act based on their thoughts, not just their immediate actions. This ability to think ahead and solve problems internally marks the end of the sensomotor period and the beginning of the pre-operational period, according to Piaget. Object permanence is our understanding that objects continue to exist even when we can't see them. This concept is a key achievement of the sensomotor period. Piaget describes the development of object permanence in terms of the same six-stage progression that he used for the sensomotor period as a whole. During the first two substages, that is, the first 3 or 4 months, babies do not realize that objects exist apart from their own action on them. Should a toy drop off the side, for example, the third-month-old acts as though it no longer exists. It's only during the third substage, at about 4 to 8 months, that babies begin to search for vanished objects. For example, Piaget might hide a toy under a pillow a few times, letting his daughter find it each time. Then, he hides the toy under a blanket while she watches. Despite seeing this, she still searches under the pillow. This behavior, known as the R not B error, shows that even at this stage a baby's knowledge of objects is tied to their actions. The infant does, of course, eventually overcome this limitation. The substage 5 infant can handle the multiple hiding place problem that baffle a younger baby. But there is still one more limitation. The infant can handle such problems only if they can see the object as it is moved from one hiding place to another. To infer the movements of a hidden object, the infant must be able to represent the object when it's not visible. Solution of this problem is found only at substage 6, when the capacity for symbolic functioning emerges. The work on object permanence illustrates the development as a process of progressive decentering. According to Piaget, the infant begins life in a state of profound egocentrism. That is, they literally cannot distinguish between themselves and the outer world. The young infant simply does not know what is specific to the self, one's own perception, actions, wishes, and so on, and what exists apart of the self. Only gradually across infancy does the infant descend and grow more aware of both self and the world. The second theme is the importance of inference in development. Piaget maintained that one important kind of knowledge that the child must acquire is a knowledge of what is it that stays the same, remains invariant, in the face of constant change. The first and most basic cognitive invariant is object permanence, the realization that the existence of objects is invariant despite changes in our perceptual experience of them. The pre-operational period is a time when kids are little explorers, figuring out the world in their unique ways. Remember, Piaget age norms are more like guidelines than strict rules. Some kids might zoom ahead while others take their sweet time. Imagine a teeny genius who can solve puzzles but might also believe that the moon follows them home. It's a time of surprising adult-like abilities mixed with some head-scratching, hard-to-believe mistakes. This blend makes the pre-operational period one of the most intriguing and challenging stages to understand. During this period, kids start using one thing to represent something else. They also begin talking about objects that aren't there. Even had a conversation with a kid about their imaginary friend. Well, that's a milestone in action. Another important milestone is deferred imitation. Babies start imitating from early on, but initially they can only copy what they see right in front of them. Near the end of infancy, according to Piaget, they start imitating things they saw in the past, like copying an older sibling's behavior from a week ago. This shows they can store and recall these actions. Finally, there is symbolic play, which any parent will recognize. This is when kids' play become enriched with the ability to use one thing in deliberate pretense to stand for something else. Sticks turned into boats, sand piled into cakes, and brooms into horses. It's a magical time of creativity and imagination. Children around 3 to 4 years old often think that everyone else sees, feels, and knows exactly what they do. This means they are often fail to take the perspective of their listener, acting as the listener already knows everything they know. We saw that infancy begins with profound egocentrism. A major achievement of infancy is a gradual decentering, where infants start to learn what is specific to themselves and what exists apart of them. The pre-operation period also starts with egocentrism, but this time it's a representational level rather than sensory-motor one. According to Piaget, young pre-operational children have a very limited ability to understand the psychological experiences of others. They find it hard to break away from their own perspective to see things from someone else's point of view. Piaget also studied children's ability to assume the visual perspective of another person. The best known task for studying this is the three mountains problem. After walking around a display of three mountains, the child is seated on one side and the researcher moves a doll to various locations around the board. The child's task is to indicate what the doll will see from different locations. For many young children, the answer is clear. The doll will see exactly what they see. Again, the young child acts as though their own perspective is the only one possible. Pre-operational children tend to focus on just one part of a problem at a time. Imagine a child who gets so mesmerized by shiny wrapping paper on a gift that they forget there is a toy inside. Once something grabs their attention, it's thought for them to shift their focus and consider other details. Take the famous Piagetian task, the conversation problem. Conversation is the understanding that the quantity of something doesn't change just because its appearance does. Picture this. You have two rows of the same numbers of coins. If you spread one row to make it longer, a 3 to 4 years old will likely say that the longer row has more coins. Why? Because it's longer. In Piaget terms, the child is focusing on the length of the road and missing the fact that the number of coins hasn't changed. Centration is all about this kind of perceptually biased thinking. For young children, what matters most is how things look right now. Their attention is captured by the most striking element of what they see. In the coin task, it's the length of the rows. Once the attention is hooked, it's hard for them to shift gears and notice other information, like the density of the coins. This means they can be easily fooled by appearance and often end up with the wrong answer, like in the conversation task. The concrete operation period is like the golden age of middle childhood, stretching from around 6 to about 11 or 12. Think of it as a time when kids start to get a real handle of the world around them. They become young scientists, figuring out how things really work. Let's look at some concrete operation period milestones. First up is conservation. kids start mastering different forms of conservation, like understanding that the number of cookies remains the same even if you spread them out on a plate. Next is class inclusion. This is the knowledge that a smaller group, like poodles, can outnumber the larger group they belong to, like dogs. The child doesn't just know there is and not more roses than flowers or more dogs than animals. They understand that it's logically impossible for a subclass to be larger than the subordinate class. Then we have serration. It's about lining things up by size or amount. Imagine organizing your pencil from the shortest to tallest without getting distracted by the cool colors. It's a concrete operational achievement, yet most young children fail the task. What serration requires is a systematic and logical approach where the child thinks of each pencil as being simultaneously longer than the one before and shorter than the one after it. This two-dimensional, non-centrated approach to problem solving is what the pre-operational child lacks. Lastly, there is transitivity, the ability to combine relation logically to deduce necessary conclusions. For example, if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then A is bigger than C. In Piaget theory, there is a concrete operational achievement. Note that in both transitivity and class inclusion, the correct answer follows as a logically necessary implication from the information ability. Concrete operations refer to the various forms of mental action by which older children solve problems and reason logically according to Piaget. Let's look at some key features. Decentration is the ability to keep multiple aspects of situation in mind simultaneously. Unlike younger children who focus on just one aspect of a task, concrete operational children can appreciate that while some features of a problem may change, others remain constant. Reversibility is a property of operational structures that allows the cognitive system to correct or reverse potential failures, leading to adaptive and accurate understanding of the world. It is a power that concrete operational thought has, which pre-operational thought lacks. However, there is a limitation. Children in this stage are still unable to think hypothetically. They can handle concrete, tangible problems but struggle with abstract or hypothetical scenarios. Children appear way less egocentric than Piaget thought. The three-mountain task requires more than simply avoiding an egocentric response. To come up with the correct answer, the child must engage in a very complicated process of spatial calculation. Perhaps the young child problem with this task tells us more about the spatial computation skills than about egocentrism. When the task is simplified, young children often appear considerably less egocentric. For example, children as young as 3 years old can predict another person's viewpoints when familiar toys rather than Piaget mountains serve as landmarks. Even 2 years old shows some awareness of others' points of view. 4-year-olds use simpler speech when talking to 2-year-olds than when talking to another 4 years old or adults. They adjust the level of their communication to the cognitive resources of the listener. Indeed, even 2 years old talk somewhat differently to their infant siblings than to adults. Children can use symbols earlier than Piaget suggested. Although infants can recognize the correspondence between an object and a picture, they apparently do not yet realize that a picture is simply a symbolic depiction of a real thing. A 9-month-old presented with a realistic color photograph on an object pats and rubs the photo as though there is an object itself. By 19 months, this confusion has disappeared and pointing and vocalizing replace the manual exploration. When verbal instructions are changed, children show the ability for conservation earlier. Just like with perspective taking, researchers have simplified the conservation task in various ways. For example, instead of asking kids about same or more, they let them pick candies to eat or juice to drink. Or they make the context more natural and familiar by embedding the task within a game. While these changes don't completely eliminate errors, they often result in better performance by 4 and 5 years old who are supposedly in the preparational stage. Critics of these methods argue that such changes might bias younger children to give responses that seem to show conservation skills. They suggest that children's correct answers might be due to perceptual mechanisms rather than true cognitive understanding. In other words, kids might just be good at noticing when something is added or taken away, rather than truly understanding the concept of conservation. Formal operation is the final period in Piaget's stage hierarchy. Once acquired, formal operations are assumed to last through a person's lifetime. This stage usually begins around age 12 or 13, making the start of adolescence. However, formal operation may emerge later or, in some cases, not at all. As we will see, evidence suggests that not everyone reaches the formal operation period. Concrete operational children are still limited to dealing largely with what is directly in front of them, what is concrete, tangible, and real. They can't yet handle the hypothetical world of possibilities. Formal operational thinkers, however, show no such limitation. The distinguishing characteristic of the formal operational period is the capacity for hypothetical deductive reasoning. These thinkers move easily and surely through the world of what if, might be, and if then. Piaget's favorite way of characterizing the differences between concrete operation and formal operation was to talk about reversal in relation between reality and possibility. For concrete operational child, the standing point is always immediate reality. From this point, the child can make very limited extensions into the hypothetical. For the formal operational thinker, in contrast, the starting point is the world of possibility, whatever might be true. From this starting point in the possible, the thinker works back to what happened to be true in the situation under study. Piaget may have overestimated children's ability to solve tasks requiring formal operation. Many adults struggle with these tasks too. Piaget tasks are unfamiliar to most people, and the usual method of administrating them might not bring out the best performance. Studies have shown that a simple hint or prompt can lead to a significant improvement on later trials. More standard training procedures and other simplification have lifted formal operation performance in children as young as 9 or 10 years old. Another approach is to vary the content of the task. People might use formal operation when reasoning about content that is interesting and familiar to them. For example, college students' ability to reason at a formal operational level depended on the fit between their academic training and the specific tasks. Physics major did the best on the pendulum task, English major excelled at analyzing literature style, and political science majors scored highs on political reasoning problems. Cross-cultural research also highlights the importance of specific experience. People from non-Western cultures may not do well on Piaget's problems but can show immersive performance in more familiar and culturally significant domains. Another indication of the importance of experience comes from across time comparisons. Adolescents tested in the 1990s earned higher scores on formal operational tasks than those tested in the 1960s and early 1970s. The most plausible explanation for this rise in performance is changes in relevant experience over the 25-year span, especially improvements in education. The legacy of Piaget's cognitive developmental approach has recently branched out into the intriguing development in what we call theory of mind. In the last decade, theory of mind has become a hot topic in cognitive development research. Theory of mind refers to Kant's understanding of the mental world, basically how they think about thinking, believing, wanting, and intending. One area of particular interest is how kids understand false beliefs. The idea that people can believe things that aren't true. 3 years old usually struggle with this concept, but by age 4, kids start to get it. They realize that they can hold a false belief and that a representation can change even if reality doesn't. They also understand that others can have false beliefs too. This understanding usually kicks in during the preparation period, ages 2 to 6, showing that kids can tell the difference between what's in their heads and what's actually out there. By the time they hit age 5, most kids have figured out how experiences shape beliefs. For instance, they can figure out which of two adults knows what's inside a box after watching one adult peek inside while the other just stands there. But this knowledge takes time to develop. 3 years old are unable to answer this question. One of the most interesting ongoing research efforts looks at the relationship between theory of mind understanding and social behavior. Kids' understanding of the mental world helps them interact with others, and this interaction in turn teaches them about beliefs and other mental states. There is a positive link between understanding theory of mind and social behavior. For example, having more siblings can boost a child's ability to understand false beliefs. Further evidence for a link between theory of mind understanding and social behavior comes from studying childhood autism. From an early age, children with autism show little interest in other people and struggle to form interpersonal relationships. Research shows that these children also have significant deficiencies in theory of mind understanding.